Well, Senator, will you commit to accepting the election results of 2024? Bottom line.
Well, at the end of the day, the 47th president of the United States will be President Donald Trump, and I'm excited to get back to low inflation, low unemployment.
Wait, Senator, yes or no? Yes or no? Will you accept the election results of 2024 no matter who wins?
That is my statement.
During a Sunday morning interview, Tim Scott, a Republican senator from South Carolina and Donald Trump's potential vice presidential running mate, repeatedly refused to commit to accepting the results of the 2024 election unless Donald Trump wins, thus demonstrating how radicalized he's become and how dangerous he and his party are to the future of American democracy. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bell before you go. I greatly appreciate it. All right, friends, we have a couple of clips to look at in this video, and one of them is about 3 to 4 minutes long, but it is so illustrative and it demonstrates why I am so hard on the modern Republican Party and why I say collectively there's no room in America for an elected Republican official. They should lose every election this year because none of them can be trusted to maintain American democracy. And Tim Scott, who used to be seen as a principled conservative, a man who was devout in his religious faith, a kind man who got along with Democrats, even though he had sincere policy disagreements. He's auditioning to be Donald Trump's vice presidential running mate and has been rumored to be a potential vice presidential running mate for months. And in this interview, he demonstrates just how far he's fallen despite what was apparently once a noble past. He lies repeatedly in this interview. We're going to play a clip about that. But in this particular exchange, he repeatedly refuses to commit to accepting the results of the 2024 election unless it has one specific outcome.
Future.
All right, well, let's talk about some of the headlines this week. In an interview, Mr. Trump this week again would not commit to accepting the election results of 2024 if he loses. He still hasn't conceded the last election. You, of course, did vote to certify the 2020 election results, and you've said, quote, "It was not stolen." Why would you join a ticket with someone who believes the exact opposite on this critical point?
Well, I think we have to listen to what President Trump said and not what the reporters said that he actually said. Here's one of the things that he's been very clear in even talking about the situation in Wisconsin. What he said was he expects there to be an honest election. He expects the results to be clear and for him to be successful. I expect him to be successful as well. There's no doubt that when you look at the polls across our country, the one thing that is crystal clear, that the American people now having a contrast between 4 years of Joe Biden versus 4 years of Donald Trump, they're really excited to get back to the Trump years. And so I expect the election to be fair, and I expect Donald Trump to be our next president.
In terms of what he said, he specifically said, if it's not fair, as you're saying, you have to fight for the right of the country. And just this week, he said that he won Wisconsin falsely, Senator. So again, to the point, you voted to certify the election results of 2020. It's the exact opposite of what you said and did after 2020. Why would you want to be on a ticket with someone where there's such a fundamental difference?
There is clear facts here. President Trump himself said he expects this election to be fair, he expects it to be honest, and he expects to win. That's what the presidential candidate should expect, and I expect the exact same thing. And frankly, the American people agree with him. This is an issue that is not an issue, so I'm not going to make it an issue.
Well, Senator, will you commit to accepting the election results of 2024? Bottom line.
Well, at the end of the day, the 47th president of the United States will be President Donald Trump, and I'm excited to get back to low inflation, low unemployment.
Wait, Senator, yes or no? Yes or no? Will you accept the election results of 2024 no matter who wins?
That is my statement.
But is it just yes or no? Will you accept the election results of 2024?
I look forward to President Trump being the 47th president. Kristen, you can ask him multiple times.
Senator, just a yes or no answer.
So the American people will make the decision.
But I don't hear you committing
for President Trump. That's clear.
I don't hear you committing to the election results.
Here's the challenge.
Will you commit to accepting the election results?
This is why so many Americans believe that NBC is an extension of the Democrat Party. At the end of the day, I've said what I've said, and I know that the American people, their voices will be heard, and I believe that President Trump will be our next president. It's that simple.
But senators, you know, the hallmark of our democracy is that both candidates agree to a peaceful transfer of power. So I'm asking you, as a potential VP nominee, will you accept to commit to the election results in this election cycle, no matter who wins? Just simply yes or no.
I expect President Trump to win the next election. Listen, I'm not going to answer your hypothetical question when, in fact, I believe the American people are speaking today on the results of the election. And if it continues for the next 6 months, we find ourselves in a great position where we get back to another century of American prosperity. Yeah. I'm looking forward to that.
All right. Let me ask.
So kudos to Kristen Welker for repeatedly holding Scott's feet to the fire. She probably just should have ended the interview after that, because, folks, there's just so much wrong there. So number one, she hits him with the fact that Donald Trump in 2024 has once again refused to commit to accepting the results of the upcoming election. He did the same damn thing in 2020 as the sitting president prior to the election. He was repeatedly asked, will you accept the results of the election regardless of the outcome, even if you lose? And he would never say yes. And he, in fact, didn't accept the outcomes of the 2020 election, or the outcome of the 2020 election, which is why he tried to litigate his way into a second term, which is why he refused to commit to the peaceful transfer of power. He broke that tradition by fomenting an insurrectionist mob to attack the Capitol, and he still has not publicly conceded the results. He still says it was stolen from him. And by the way, he did the same thing in terms of refusing to accept the results of the election in 2016. In 2016, he was repeatedly asked prior to the election, will you accept the results if you lose? And he would not accept it. He said he would not commit to accepting the results if he lost. Now, he ended up winning because of the Electoral College, but Tim Scott does the same thing here. Tim Scott makes it very clear there's only one outcome that he will accept, which is that Donald Trump wins the election. And then he appeals to polling, which, again, there's been favorable polling for Donald Trump. But the election isn't today, Senator Scott. The election is in November. So I don't know why you're appealing to polling in early May for something that's going to happen months from now in November. It's logically, it doesn't make any sense. It's incoherent. It's just a lie. You would have a point if the election was today. The election is not today, so it doesn't matter. The polls may very well change. You thought, Senator Scott, that Donald Trump would win in 2020, and he lost. And as Kristen Welker pointed out, he voted to certify the election. Tim Scott was not so radical in 2020. He voted to certify the results of Donald Trump's defeat. And when asked about it in 2020, he said that it wasn't stolen. Now he's been radicalized 4 years later. He is now so deep in the MAGA cult because he's so desperate to become Donald Trump's running mate that he has gleefully sacrificed his principles and his consistency on the altar of the MAGA cult. He refuses to engage with the question and just repeatedly says Donald Trump would be president, appeals to polls, which makes no sense. He has a terrible argument. He knows he looks bad, but he doesn't care, because one thing is true. He feels that the momentum right now is on Donald Trump's side. And listen, there's a good argument to be made for that. He probably does feel a degree of confidence. I think he is being wildly overconfident, but still wildly irresponsible regardless. President Biden committed to accepting the results of the 2020 election. When he's been asked about 2024, he said the same thing. What would Tim Scott say if President Biden, the sitting president, or Vice President Kamala Harris, the vice president who has to preside over the election results, what if they refused to accept the results of the election, Tim Scott? What if they did that? How would you feel? How would you feel if the people who are actually in power say, you know what, maybe we'll pull a Donald Trump? Just to show you, just give you a taste of your own medicine. What would Tim Scott do? He'd freak out. And he'd clutch his pearls, and he would whine, and he would complain, and he'd be right to do so, because that would be dangerous, even if Democrats do it. But Democrats don't do that. And certainly not anywhere near to the same extent. You've had Democrats complain about the results of elections in the past, but nothing like this. And you've never had Democrats publicly say in advance of an election that they would refuse to accept the results of it. Tim Scott is demonstrating just how cultish and radical the modern Republican Party is, and why even the so-called principled conservative Republican politicians have no place in the halls of power in a civilized society. They are a cult. They are bad faith, authoritarian cult of personality, and they should lose every damn election until there is a hard reset on the Republican Party, until they commit to fidelity of Constitution. There's no reason for Tim Scott to be in Congress. Tim Scott should lose his next election. He may not, probably won't, because he's an incumbent Republican in South Carolina. But the bottom line is, in terms of moral fitness, in terms of, consistency of standard, in terms of fidelity to the Constitution, He's failed. He's failed that test. And he is further proof that I am right and others are right to have a complete and total distrust of the entire Republican Party. If you are a Republican politician, every American should greet you with absolute distrust. You deserve no benefit of the doubt whatsoever, because when push comes to shove, they almost always fall in line behind Donald Trump cultishly. Now, there was also another moment in which Tim Scott engaged in dishonesty, and it was actually about President Biden's record compared to Donald Trump's. And actually, Kristen Welker fact-checked him on at least one point, and I just want to play this part and dive deeper into it.
You were there for what is being described as an audition to be a potential VP pick with former President Donald Trump. So let me just ask you, did you discuss with the former president the possibility of being his running mate, Senator?
No, man, what we talked about this weekend was how bad the economy is for single parents like the one that raised me. We had a lot of conversations around the room about the importance of eliminating Bidenomics, about the importance of getting inflation back down to 2%. We were just better off under President Trump. Inflation, Kristen, was at 2%, and we had the lowest unemployment rates for African Americans, for Hispanics, for Asians, a 70-year low for women. We had the highest funding for historically black colleges and universities in the history of the country under President Trump. So we were excited to have a conversation. We had no conversations about the VP pick, to be honest with you, to be clear, but we had a lot of conversations about the failures of Joe Biden and the success of Donald Trump.
A couple of points on the economy. Of course, the inflation rate has come down significantly from its high in 2022. In terms of black unemployment, it was actually at its lowest rate last year, 4.7% in April of 2023 as compared to 5.3% under 2019 with Donald Trump. But just to be
okay, so that was, again, just bewilderingly stupid and dishonest of someone as smart as Tim Scott. And by the way, he's been doing this quite a bit. So first things first, David Doney, who's an account you should follow if you don't. This guy he's an economics wonk. He constantly fact checks Republicans. He's followed by many major accounts. You should check him out. Scott's lying, of course. Unemployment rate is far lower for all racial groups comparing entire terms in office. Number two, if you remove the pandemic, February 2020 to December 2021, Biden is also far better. Number three, black unemployment is lower even if you compare Trump pre-pandemic to Biden overall. So again, overall groups, 5% unemployment on average compared to 4.2 under Biden, 7.9 for black unemployment under Trump compared to 6.6, 6.2 under Trump for Latinos, 5.2 under Biden, 4.4% under Trump for Asian Americans compared to 3.5. White Americans, 4.5 under Trump compared to 3.7 under Biden. And again, even if you control for the pandemic, Biden's unemployment rates are better. So then, after she fact checks him and is like, listen, actually, black unemployment has been much, in terms of at its best, Biden's best in terms of black unemployment is objectively better than Donald Trump's. And that's true. So then he says, well, it's okay, sure. But right now it's 6.4%. So we're talking about 6.4% in March, April. April, it's 5.6. So it's a decrease. So he's a bit wrong on that. This is from the St. Louis Federal Reserve. And so it's 5.6 right now in April. Okay, April in Biden's fourth year in office. What was it in April of Trump's fourth year in office? Let's see. March, May. Let's see. March, it was 7% unemployment rate. It's hard to get the actual April. April, it was 16.9% unemployment, black unemployment rate. Folks, so the fourth year of Trump compared to the fourth year of Biden, 5.6 for Biden, 16.9 for Trump. Since we're comparing at the same point in the timeline, overall, it's just been better. Again, even if you control for the pandemic, what was it prior to the pandemic? So let's go March again, before the pandemic actually began in earnest, it was 7% black unemployment for Trump. And right now it's 5.6% under Biden. No matter how you slice it, no matter how desperate you are to grade Donald Trump on a curve, it's still better under Biden. Folks, we have to take this argument to them. Even if Republicans, we grant you your charitable conditions for Trump, Trump still loses. Trump still loses, even if we do that. whereas Biden has the better economic record no matter what. It's just simply the case. And we're not obligated to really do that in the first place. We're not obligated to grade Donald Trump on a curve. We are just not obligated to do it. I'll also point out that Tim Scott lies about HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities. Trump funded them because of black congresspeople and senators who put it in the budget. Trump actually zeroed HBCU funding out in his federal budgets. But it took black congresspeople to actually force Trump to fund HBCUs. Trump gets no credit, as far as I'm concerned. Roland Martin, one of the best liberal political commentators out there, you all should definitely check him out. He is constantly debunking people who make these claims, Trump supporters and Tim Scott most especially. And actually, even if we graded, again, Trump on a curve here, even if we gave him that credit that he doesn't deserve, it's still better under Biden and Harris. HBCU funding is better. There's more HBCU funding under President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris than there ever was under Donald Trump. So he's still lying. But that's all they do. So right now in that interview, Tim Scott has repeatedly refused to commit to accepting the results of the upcoming election unless his cult leader wins. And he is lying about Donald Trump's record to make it more palatable. It's just simply, it's bewildering. It's nonsense stuff. And again, further proof that the Republican Party, as far as I'm concerned, they deserve no place in a modern society. The GOP has become an authoritarian cult of personality, and not a single Republican politician can be trusted. They should lose every damn election until there's a hard reset. Let me know what you think in the comments.